the idea is that no centralized entity issues the currency. And it's also deflationary because there is a max supply. So the idea is that there's an
So you can't
algorithm.
print more Bitcoin. What you're saying?
You cannot print more Bitcoin. And so over time, as more people adopt and use it, it becomes more and more valuable.
So I am super interested in your take on this. You know, a year ago, 2 years ago, NFTs were all anybody was talking about. And it's a little different now. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on what is the state of NFTs?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for having me here, Will. I think number one is there's some really interesting examples of really large brands out there that are doing a fantastic job. Two of which would be like Reddit and Starbucks. And the interesting thing I would say that they've done that's unique about their NFT programs is that they're not even calling them NFTs. They call them digital collectibles. They're calling them, it's just, Starbucks just calls it their new like Odyssey rewards program. And so I think that what a lot of groups are doing right now is a lot of fintech solutions, a lot of big brands, they've not slowed down on adopting the technology, but they have tweaked the way that they bring that technology to market and what they're calling it. The technology's the same, people just don't know that they're using it. And so I think that's one of the big differences that I've been seeing in the last couple of months is how some of the big brands have been using mass adoption with blockchain and NFTs.
Can you make a distinction? Because I've heard you use NFT business before, and like in your tweets, you've used that phrase. Can you describe the difference between like an NFT, an NFT project, and an NFT business? And if there are others, can you describe the differences between those?
Yeah. So I think I just described a couple of companies that are natively Web 2 companies that are adopting blockchain technology. So they're kind of in this like Web 2.5 space. Web 3 companies are companies that have started from the community first. So a lot of times, Web 2 companies tend to be like product driven. And so they'll create their product, they'll create their MVP, what's their minimal viable product, and then they, get a bunch of VC money and go, customer acquisition, right? Web3 companies, some that I might throw as an example would be Bored Ape Yacht Club, so like Yuga Labs, Artifact, which then got acquired by Nike, are all community-based companies. So they started as a community. The community bought the token, the NFT, and that was the startup. Those were the startup finances for the company to continue to build and develop as a company. So it's really just kind of the ethos of like how those two worlds kind of use the technology. I will say though that there are the vast majority of NFT companies out there are not great operators. So they tend to get really excited and get the community really excited, and everyone buys the token, and then they don't have any operations. They don't actually have a value proposition. They don't actually have a product that they want to continue to develop on. And so that's where a lot of Web3 NFT companies specifically kind of stumble and fall. And hence
What
why we
typically what
probably
typically
see.
do they have that makes people buy in? Celebrity status, great design, great art. Like what makes people buy into these things that have very bad business operations?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these folks are marketers. So they're really talented at marketing. They're really talented. The artwork is really attractive. People love being a part of something there's kind of this like indie culture of folks not, oh, I'm an early adopter, right? NFT Web3 people love being like early adopters. So they love being able to like be on the bleeding edge of the next trend. And so I think that in combination with the fact that people who, if they wanted to resell the NFT, they can make money off of it. So you add those two components together, making money, culture, tech, and it's kind of a winning recipe for people to buy into something. The problem is that they've lost a lot of money along the way.
Yeah. Can you describe more about the projects? What typically is the thread between projects that are successful, that gave them unique or innovative, features that allowed them to be successful, other than the operation, which we'll talk about?
Hmm. Yeah. Great question. So I think that some, I call them at St. Rock, we call them value engines. And so you have to be really clear on what exactly you're offering. What is the value proposition for? Sometimes you have some artists out there that it's literally just art, and that is the value prop. And you got to have the art, and that's it, and it's beautiful. And the interesting thing is as the market has kind of had a bit of a downturn, art projects have performed better and maintained their value better than the projects that promised, these really fantastic roadmaps. So that's been a bit of an ironic and an interesting thing to see. But other than that, I think that basically you're asking like what makes some of these projects successful. Some successful projects. I think it also comes down to the funding and the runway. Some of these projects raised a lot of money. They through the NFT, and they had the time to go and acquire like talent to help them figure it out. So some of them just had the runway to go like figure out what they were going to offer. Doodles, for example, they hired Pharrell as their chief creative officer, and so between Doodles, Yuga Labs, Artifacts, some of these other big projects, they just simply had extra funding to like help them figure out what they're going to do. Some of them have moved really aggressively into gaming because I think that they think that that's like a really viable business model going into the new year.
When you are looking at the team who's building a project, even building a community, what are you looking for as an investor in NFTs? Like, what kind of things give you signals that say, you know what, this is likely going to be around a while because these things are in place?
Hmm. Yeah, number one, the team has to be doxxed. And by doxxed, that just means they cannot be anonymous. And so you have to be able to do your due diligence to be able to look at, okay, great, let's look at this person's LinkedIn profile. Let's look at, what is their history of just participating in this like overall ecosystem over a period of time. So that's important. What's their background? What experience do they have? They're saying they're going to bring a game, a metaverse game to market. Great. Who on the team has actually done that before? Those are some of the things that you would do kind of during your own personal due diligence process. Looking at the community. How engaged is the community? If they are hosting a Twitter Spaces on Twitter, great. How many people show up? How many people are engaged and are asking questions during that Twitter space? Another thing would be to look at, again, the team's important. What is the value prop? What is the business model beyond the initial NFT sale? Because if I think that a lot of people who are attracted to NFTs and Web3, they tend to be kind of like libertarian from a kind of political slant and point of view. They don't want to be the product, which is why they're happy to pay money up front because they don't like traditional social media platforms. And so the problem, though, is that, again, with some of these folks who are running these projects and they're not great operators, all they know how to do is sell NFTs to people. They don't know how to create products. And therefore, those same people that don't want to be the product realize that they end up being the product again because they're just selling more NFTs to people.
So talk about the value proposition, because so often when we hear about value propositions, hey, your NFT gets you in the door at this party, or it gets you, a ticket to, meet me and have lunch face to face. Like, what are better things other than just, I shouldn't say better, like what are other things other than just a ticket to the party that NFTs, really unique opportunities have provided for those holders?
Yeah. I think that with some of these, I think that a lot of, again, the industry is so nascent, right? And so a lot of those business models are still being ironed out. When we're talking to clients, we're like, hey, look, NFTs are not a business. I wrote a tweet about this too. NFTs are not a business model within themselves. You already have to have an established business model that NFTs can be an added value layer to something that's already pre-existing. You already need to know that the market is there. You need to know that the solutions that you provide are already there. I'll give you an example of one that we actually did for an higher education product. Um, Essentially, it was a membership pass. Buy your NFT. Think it's not too much different than like a Costco membership. We have a network of partners of online colleges around and universities around the country, all tier 6 or tier 5 or higher accreditation. They're in our network of schools that you can, if you have our NFT pass, you get access to any of those schools. You can enroll. Obviously, you still have to apply and get in. But assuming that that happens, you get access to those college credits at like 20 to 30% off of what retail is.
Wow.
And so similar, so it was almost the idea, if you're familiar with like Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs, or if you're familiar with obviously Costco, it was like wholesale online college courses. And so that was like that was a very tactical and practical application of how you have a membership pass that then translates into real world savings for something that people want, which is, well, some people want a college degree.
And so you touched on this a little bit about NFT art, and that's one, vertical inside the NFT space. And it was super duper hot a year ago, 18 months ago, or any time in that window. Where are we with just NFT art beyond the ones that have communities behind them? It's just a pretty picture. Where are we today? Is there still value today? If I'm a designer and I'm just a designer, I may not be a community builder. Is there still value? Is it still worth it for me to go to OpenSea and publish my thing?
Well, with all of these things, you still have to build community, because at the end of the day, we're talking economics and we're talking supply and demand, and that's regardless of if you're an NFT artist. Those rules apply even just in the regular traditional art world as well. So regardless of whatever you're offering to the world, there has to be a buyer for it. So the value prop for artists, and I think the reason why so many artists are attracted to NFTs is because of the royalty component. And so they're like, okay, great. If I'm going to spend all my time and energy creating this piece of art, I want to be able to extract and capture as much value from it as possible. And I think that the smart contract, the royalties and perpetuity is what attracts so many artists.
And so I was having a conversation with a nonprofit executive director. So think of it in the way of a zoo executive director or a metro park executive director. They were wondering what the value of them could be with producing an NFT collection, and doing research online and learning about this. There's an argument to there's no secondary value or very little secondary value of holding that NFT. Like, so if I'm buying the NFT to support sustainability at my local park, what is the value to the next person who may want to buy that thing? So can you talk about that concept and how to fix it?
Yeah, so two things I would say. One is, if you are that type of organization or something like that, I'm actually a really big fan of, instead of the organization, especially like a nonprofit, like I actually did a talk about this at NFT NYC. My argument was that nonprofits should actually, instead of doing their own project, they should actually partner with artists. They should actually partner with folks who have a value prop that extends beyond visiting, the rescue center or whatever the case may be, because instead of like having their own NFT project or perhaps doing it in collaboration, now that nonprofit entity can have their wallet address written into the primary and secondary sales of that chain in perpetuity, being a partner to organizations that do have a secondary driver for what's going to drive those secondary sales. So that's typically the strategy that I actually
could you give an example of what that might look like?
Yeah, there's an NFT called, I'll give you a good example, and I'll give you an example of one that I literally use this at NFT NYC. A case study of this one project called Flower Girls. And it's an artist, her name is Ava something, I forgot her name. So she comes from the traditional art world. She has a huge community already. Part of the project is they wanted to make sure that they were giving back to the community. So they give to women and girls shelters. And so as a part of, they have a gamified component where they have like, I don't want to bore you to death, but it's like they have seeds and these different, it's like very garden, themed is the NFT. And so they have like this gamified thing where you plant your seeds and water the seeds and watch the flowers grow and this whole thing, right? But as people get into the game and they're playing it and they're trading their NFTs back and forth, that's the volume that's happening on the secondary. And because of the partnership they have with like the women's shelters and things like that, those nonprofits are benefiting from all of the transactions happening on that smart contract.
So you had tweeted 6 months ago, maybe, about when you were at Basel, you were at Art Basel, and you were talking about you wouldn't believe that the world of crypto is falling apart if you were in that environment because the energy was so palpable. I want to particularly talk about the falling apart part of that comment there, and because there is a sense that crypto isn't what it was cracked up to be. Some people lost a bunch of money, whether they aped into stuff, whatever. People lost money, and there's some people who are really, really big winners. And it just came out a couple of days ago. Peter Thiel pulled out a bunch, right before the market crashed. And so, how does he know? Who knows? But the idea I wanted to discuss is, what is your take on the world of crypto and its long-term value?
Yeah. So I think this is where I think a lot of people have a pretty bad misconception. The base layer technology that we're talking about is blockchain technology. The first use case, the firstborn child use case of blockchain technology is cryptocurrency. So usually when I'm having this kind of conversation, I love to kind of have a first principles conversation around the use case and the efficacy of blockchain technology. Cryptocurrency is a use case of blockchain. So cryptocurrency is not going anywhere. This is, I think, a lot of people. So if you go back and we'll kind of do some history, 2017 was the last time that there was a really big influx of users and onboardings into the blockchain and crypto space. 2021 was just the most recent version of that. So if you look back at any of like the trading charts since the beginning of Bitcoin in 2009 and Ethereum in 2000, I think it was like 12, I think, this kind of rise and fall is normal, to be quite frank. And you don't lose money if you don't sell. So there's no such thing as there are realized gains and realized losses. And so everyone who has held and gone through all of these cycles over the last decade have gained. So if we're looking, it really depends on what perspective your chart is that you're looking at your chart. But if you're looking at in the last 12 months, well then yeah, everyone's crying right now. But if you look at the next 3 years until the next Bitcoin bull cycle, if you hold, perhaps you'd be giving people kisses.
There you go. So I have this concept, particularly to what you're just talking about here. If you talk about particularly Bitcoin, Ethereum, whether or not either of those, are around, 20 years from now, is aside from the point. My idea, and I want your take on this to help me shape it, is that there will be a digital currency that is mainstream. Period. What it is, whether it's Ethereum that we still, transact with 10 years from now, I don't know. Possibly there's a strong case for it, either that or Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a little slower. But to your point, the first principle, what do you foundationally believe is where I'd like to invest. And I foundationally believe that this technology, I don't know which currency built on top of it will work, but I do believe that the technology has the blockchain has the technology to build what we will use as a mainstream currency in the future. What is your take?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. That is the question. Back in 2017, it's what we called like the ICO boom, initial coin offering.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there are a lot of really terrible projects out there that didn't do anything. And so it was, I mean, just look at the, copy and paste. What happened in 2021 is the exact same thing that happened back then. You got a lot of people excited about making money. Nobody actually wanted to provide value to the marketplace. Cool. It was a big bubble. It popped. But the real players, I do feel confident. Bitcoin is the most, like, if you were to look at this on a line and look at, on one end you have the most decentralized blockchain, and then on another end of the spectrum you have the least decentralized blockchain.
Let's describe what that means for people who
Sure.
may not get what centralized and decentralized means before you go too far.
Yeah, so decentralization is really like the reason why blockchain was created in the first place. I don't want to go too into history, but the reason why Bitcoin was created was out of the housing crisis of 2008. Essentially, the idea that we were, as my parents put their money into real estate, put their money into their 401ks, as that's what everyone was told to do, as like the safe way to invest your money. And yet you have bankers who do fractional reserve banking, right? Where they're allowed to leverage the funds of inside of, your bank account. You put your money into the bank or into some type of investment vehicle. They take those funds, invest them. They give you a percentage back of what they make, right? It's basically how it works. They lost their money. They were doing really risky investments, and they lost your money. They lost your investment. And so essentially, because of that, the value of putting your money into those investments. So anyways, long story short, the person or people, Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin, was pissed off and was like, instead of putting our money in the hands of the government, I want to be self-sovereign and control my own value. And so he created Bitcoin. And the idea of decentralization is that no one entity, most centralized currencies are, central bank or central reserve issues that currency. The idea is that no centralized entity issues the currency. And it's also deflationary because there is a max supply. So the idea is that there's an algorithm.
So you can't print more Bitcoin. What you're saying?
You cannot print more Bitcoin. And so over time, as more people adopt and use it, it becomes more and more valuable.
And what you were saying previous to that was, if you look at the Bitcoin on a line, and you were going to go down the trajectory. I want to bring you back to that.
Yeah, exactly. So on a spectrum of like most decentralized is Bitcoin. You have a bunch of different validators all around the world. You think about AWS, and they have like centralized hubs where their servers live, and that's why AWS is able to provide hosting services to companies all around the world. Imagine AWS, but like AWS doesn't own all those servers. We do, right? As just individual people, I can run a validator on my computer right now. You can run a validator on your computer. We're all keeping Bitcoin running. No one owns it, essentially. No one person and no one entity owns it. So that's what decentralization means. On the other end of the spectrum, because people have seen how valuable these networks are, you have companies that have created their own blockchain, which means it is AWS, essentially.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's so important to understand and to really be educated on the ABCs of blockchain and why it was created in the first place. So going back to your original question of like what blockchains are going to survive over time, I think Bitcoin is a really good bet, simply because it's the most decentralized. No one controls it. That's also why Bitcoin is also the hardest to build on top of, because no one controls it and no one is in charge of actually maintaining. Like, the technology is fantastic. There are Bitcoin foundations and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, that vote and have governance and say, okay, great, we're going to vote to agree to upgrade this part of the network, but no one owns it. And so Bitcoin is really safe, in my opinion. Ethereum's also really good. Ethereum's kind of a middle of the road. They're decentralized enough, in my perspective, but you also have people who are really intentionally building on top of it. So you've got a bunch of companies. NFTs, let's talk about NFTs, for example.
Yeah.
People are not building NFTs on top of Bitcoin. People are building NFTs on top of Ethereum. So it's just an interesting use case to look at. Okay, well, how are people using the technology, and more companies are using Ethereum. So those are some of the blockchains I think are safe bets.
And so there are people who are still excited about purchasing NFTs. And since we're talking about decentralization, can you touch on, you can buy an NFT and it not be decentralized. You could buy an NFT and it's sitting on somebody's server in their, basement. So can you talk about
Which
how,
NFT is that?
I mean, so there's ones that you can put on, I forgot what the name of the distributed server is for NFTs.
Okay.
um, what is it? It's a decentralized. Once you put it up on, all right, it sucks. I'm trying to remember the name of the decentralized server that
Okay.
that hosts the file.
Oh,
You
like
know what I'm talking about?
IFP, like
Yeah,
IFPS.
IPS. That's, yes. I could not think of the word. And
Oh,
so
okay.
yes, and so you could put an NFT on AWS, and because you just referencing it,
The
right?
artwork.
Yes, you
The art.
referencing the artwork. So can you talk about the value in knowing where your NFT is, the artwork is hosted?
Sure. Yeah, that's okay. That's a good question. I two parts to that. One is that I don't know that that is necessarily like the artwork in the same way that people can like copy and like download the artwork. I don't know that that's actually the value of the NFT. It's really the serial number. So like even if the artwork itself is not on chain, if it's being hosted on like Pinata, for example, we've used Pinata as a service to host the artwork and things like that. It's really about like the artwork tied to the serial number, almost like the certificate of authenticity, if you will, that does live on chain. So there are some projects that are like our artwork is on chain. Cool. Okay, that's fine. That's sure if that tickles your fancy. I personally care to know that that artwork tied to the serial number. That's what I care about, is the serial number that says this serial number owns that artwork. As long as that serial number is on chain, that's personally what I care about.
So it doesn't matter to you if the actual artwork is hosted off chain at all.
No.
Gotcha. So I want you to talk some more about that, because I find that super interesting. Because what if the artwork is stored on Bluehost or AWS or whatever, and the serial number is IPFS, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
What makes it tied together? Because if the artwork no longer exists, but I still have a serial number for a piece of artwork that doesn't exist anymore.
Because the hosting is essentially integrated into the smart contract. So essentially the database of where that file is being stored, it is also tied to that specific serial number, which is on chain. So it's all tied in. It's integrated into the smart contract.
Gotcha. And so I want to talk about your company a little bit. And you help companies and organizations grow and manage, the communities that they are desiring, even hybrid communities that they're desiring to collect. What are ways that companies and organizations that are not super sophisticated can, use the blockchain to engage their people?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So we really think about it in from the standpoint of community, and I actually talked about this at AfroTech. I talked about how can, as a consumer, how do you get the most out of your consumption? As a creator, how do you capture as much value out of what you're creating? And then as a community and as an ecosystem, how do you have your incentives aligned? And I think that that's ultimately how we think about it, is how do we create ecosystems and communities where it's a sustainable community where all incentives are aligned. I really like the use case of memberships personally. The idea of creating like a parent NFT is how I typically call it. Going back to let's for example go back to the example of like the higher education project that we did. There was a parent NFT, and that parent NFT basically produced 2 other NFTs every year. and that NFT was your access that you could burn to, get your discount, claim your discount for each semester. Because that NFT, that second child NFT, was decoupled from the parent one, now you have the control as a consumer to say, okay, great, I want to be a member of this group, but I don't necessarily plan on using the benefits of being a member of this group today. So because I have my NFTs, my other NFTs that represent the benefits of my membership, I can store them away and use them later, or I can sell them, or I can gift them. And so it's giving people in your community and in your membership organization more control and, in fact, more value for being a member within your organization or within your community. So that's typically kind of the way that we think about NFTs, at least at this stage. There's things like ticketing, free events. There's a lot of other use cases that we're kind of exploring with as well. But I just know for myself as a consumer, I'm like, okay, well, if I own this on chain and the only way that I can extract value from it is by selling the NFT, well, I don't want to sell the parent NFT because that's like how I continue to get benefits. And so you have to be able to extract and decouple the main membership NFT from all the benefits that you get from that NFT.
In particular, because I brought up organizations, I'm interested in your take on, because if you've got a token out there and you can't control whether somebody resells it, you can't control how you distribute them in the first place. People can apply to be able to purchase, but the resale is up to you or me, right? And so if we create a project that says we want to save the whales, or I'm making this up, we want to save the whales, and now we've all bonded together to create this thing. We've all got an NFT. I decide I don't like whales anymore, so I'm gonna go sell it to a whale killer. Like, how do you protect? That's a very gruesome way to set this up.
No,
but I'll let you kill. But how do you protect?
All the PETA folks are gonna come after you.
Like, how do you protect the community? Is, let's say we're creating one for all Black techies, and now you've got people who are not, even allies, who are buying this thing because somebody sold it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So this is last year. There was Vitalik Buterin, who's one of the creators of the Ethereum blockchain, wrote a white paper called talking about SBTs, or Soulbound Tokens, and it's basically a non-sellable NFT. And so this is a really good use case for things like that you probably shouldn't sell, like your social security number or your driver's license or your passport. These are things that are unique identifiers to an individual, so that it actually allows an individual to create an identity based off of data on chain, right? Like right now, when we think about identities with the metaverse and Web3, we're thinking about the PFP, the picture, the artwork.
The profile
but what
picture,
about the actual substance of the person? And that's where Soulbound tokens come into play. And so we've actually been we're kind of in the process right now of creating a couple of use cases around SBTs, and I think that that's a solution for something that you're talking about. That actually, again, kind of goes back to the model that I was just describing of like, cool, now that you're cemented into this group, and now you get these other like kid NFTs that represent your membership, so you can sell those things, but you can't sell the SBT that is tied to you. So maybe you still have like maybe you only want 1,000 people in your group, and when someone says, hey, I no longer want to be a member, great, you can have a burning mechanism that burns so that they're no longer an active member within your community. And then now you have a spot that's open and available for someone else. But then you have a vetting process and maybe some kind of application process to see if you want them in your group.
If you're looking at the ocean of opportunity that's still out there to be had by innovators, when you think about Black techies and Black innovators, where should we be looking for our lane when it comes to the blockchain? Not just NFTs and not just cryptocurrency, but the blockchain as a whole. Where would you like to see more of us and make that case?
Yeah, I think that there's still, what is the saying that like when there's a gold rush, sell the shovels.
Picks and shovels, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. there's still plenty of picks and shovels to be sold. So most of the biggest winners in this most recent you know, bull cycle, it was OpenSea, who's a marketplace. It was the exchanges who were just essentially selling you and creating tools for you to buy and sell crypto. Those were the companies that did the best. And so when I think about even the tools and products that we're thinking about building ourselves, it's okay, great. What are the SaaS products that make it easier for people to create the tools to help other people build? And so whether that's logistics, I think FedEx and UPS are creating their own internal blockchains to help them, not a cryptocurrency, simply just blockchain, to help them with logistics. I know that Amazon's creating their own coin. A lot of companies are creating this. So, and I think one of the biggest issues is helping more and more people to onboard successfully and quickly, and there being less friction. So security measures. These are all things that you can just honestly just try to sign up for MetaMask and discover like 5 businesses that you could probably make because you're like, dang, this process sucks. So
That's a fact.
There's lots of opportunity.
And because you just said that, because I love that you just said, because this process sucks, quote unquote, because it was a quote. I think it was Paul Graham. It might have been Paul Graham, might have been Mark Andreessen, who talked about, the wealth is made before the user interface is actually easy to use. That's not the actual words he used, but that's the point he was making.
Yep.
And so when the user interface is super easy, the people who were building the thing have already
Correct.
made their money, right? And so it was very difficult. It was a strong learning curve for so many people just to figure out what the blockchain was. And so how do you admonish people to not be afraid to jump into this thing? You start talking about wallets. Now you got hot wallets and cold wallets. You talk about MetaMask, you talk about, Coinbase, and all you see is bad news, bad news, bad news. How do you preach this to where there's easy entrees into these opportunities?
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily. I'm not going to encourage for it to be easy because I think to your point, it's in the friction where the fortunes are made, right? Like, it's being able to come up with the technology that makes the smooth paved road for everyone else to be able to follow after you. So I think that it is, number one, what is your expertise? What are you good at naturally? What are you doing currently that makes you money? Great. Identify that. And then as you start exploring, we have a community, so people are welcome to join that and to join our community. But it's really focused on helping other people who are builders in Web 2 to start becoming builders in Web 3. And so, we go through the basics. We go a lot of the stuff we talked about on this, right? On this episode of what is the blockchain? What's decentralization? Why does decentralization matter? This technology was built out of philosophy. So if you don't understand the philosophy of it, it's going to be hard to wrap your mind around why the technology even is so friction filled to begin with. Well, why don't we just because it's not decentralized. You ask the question, well, why isn't the artwork on chain? Well, does that matter, right? Like, these are all the things that you have to kind of like start taking those baby steps and understanding, getting your hands dirty. I think that's the thing, is just don't be afraid. I started this in 2017. At the end of 2017, I dove deep into NFT or to blockchain technology, started investing, lost money, helped my parents.
Rite of passage,
Yeah, it is. It is, right? You're like, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, I made a mistake, and it's not like I had a lot of money at the time, so it was just being willing. But part of this experience is the value of learning. And so if you're willing to kind of, not to say that you need to be willing to lose money in order to learn, but you got to be able to be in community with other people who are committed to learning about the space as well. And what they're learning is going to rub off on you as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and because I've heard so many people say almost the opposite, but it's not so far a departure from what you just said. It's like you do have to just get in to figure it out. Like, if you spend all your time on the sideline reading books, and you just have to get in. You have to buy something, buy, you know, an NFT, or, you know, convert some money over to Ethereum or whatever. And so I'm going to give you a couple different examples, and I want you to tell me what you would do. So you got $100. I'm going to do it as $1,000, $500, $100.
Okay.
At $100, what would you
Deal
do?
or no deal? Sorry.
Dealing what would you do? You want to
Yeah.
get in? Should I buy an NFT? All I have to invest, you know, discretionary in this particular vertical is $100. What do I do with it to get the best education? And then do it at 500 and 1,000.
This is good. This is good. Okay, so I think step one, $100. What I would do is
Gas fees are going to eat a lot of that, by the way.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think $100. So I would literally actually just convert it into Ethereum, go to an exchange, buy some, set it all up, buy some Ethereum, put it into your MetaMask. So basically buy the Ethereum on an exchange, put it into your MetaMask, and now you have gas fees. And so even with like some of these free NFT projects out there, it's like free plus gas.
Yeah.
So
gas fees are the toll, by the way. It's just a toll. It's like getting on a turnpike. You're paying to play.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a transaction. It's what pays, because there's no centralized company that's paying the engineers to make sure that the blockchain stays running. You're paying the folks who are keeping the blockchain running. That's what it is. And so there are plenty of free NFTs, and free NFTs are actually a trend right now because we're in a down market. You have a lot of folks who are putting out free NFTs. So what I would do is I would put that $100 into gas fees in your MetaMask wallet and go NFT hunting for some free NFTs and have just enough gas money to be able to actually mint the free NFT. That's what I do.
500. I get $500. What do you do?
$500. I would take that initial $100, put it into gas fees, take the rest of that $400 and just buy Ethereum and keep it in your wallet and take it off of the exchange and put it at the very least into your MetaMask wallet. And I assume once we get to $1,000, I can tell you what I do after that. $1,000. I would do those first few steps. Put $100 into gas fees. I think with $1,000, you can get away with buying one NFT. With the price of ETH being at around $1,500 right now, most NFTs are selling at at mint at launch, around 0.05 ETH, maybe 0.1 ETH. So that's $150. So you could go and buy an NFT. The thing though, again, is doing that due diligence. Who's the team? Are they publicly known? What are they trying to accomplish and build? Awesome. All right, make sure that you get on the allow list, because of course they're trying to do supply to demand dynamics as well. So you got to be involved in the community, which usually is going to be on Twitter and Discord. So get involved. That's free. Getting involved is free. And then if you get onto the allow list, the VIP list, mint your first NFT for like $150.
Love it. Okay, it was good to talk to you. So glad to have you on the podcast.
Appreciate it.